I would like to introduce Steve to you. In 1996, I went to the Heritage Foundation for a seminar on Taiwan. It was hosted by Harvey Feldman. We know that name, right? Very instrumental on the 6 assurances. He wrote a paper about the 6 assurances. I think he also participated in drafting the Taiwan Security Enhancement Act in 2000. And it was a windy day, it was a cold day, and turned out that Harvey Feldman would be 30 minutes late. And so the moderator at the Heritage Foundation said, I will ask our intern, Steve Yates, to come forward and, you know, start the presentation, start the event. And that was 20 pounds ago, Steve, you and me, 20 pounds ago. And Steve had more hair. And Steve did this brilliant presentation without any notes. And I thought, who's this guy? He's a brilliant guy. Maybe someday he will become the governor of Idaho. And we've been friends ever since, and he's been friends of FAPA and Taiwan ever since. He even went as a youngster to Taiwan, and because he was a missionary for the Mormon Church. And so he speaks fluent Mandarin. I've seen him do speeches in fluent Mandarin. But today he will speak English. And you can read his full bio in the handbook. So he worked for Secretary Cheney for 4 years, 6 years. And he's a foreign affairs specialist. He has his own consultant firm, DC International. So without further ado, a big hand for Steve Yates.
各位爱台湾的朋友，大家好。No, I really appreciate the introduction, and I especially appreciate the fond memories of curly hair and thick glasses and wearing sweaters at work. And back when I was a think tank scholar, and now I guess I'm no longer a scholar because I've stopped thinking. Now I just talk. That part of my life was very, very important to me. The journey that I've had the pleasure of going on between the United States and Taiwan has taught me a great deal. It has made many friends for me along the way, for which I'm very, very grateful. But really, the remarks that we enjoyed at lunch stirred a lot of feelings and memories for me as well. Some of you may notice that I'm wearing ceremonial blue. This is my bipartisan outfit, given that I'm a Republican running for office in the United States, and that's usually red. And some of you may occasion wear green. So today I'm wearing blue to prove that strong U.S.-Taiwan relations really should be broader than political parties. And it's actually a very, very important idea. Now, those of you that have the opportunity to affiliate in the United States, you need to affiliate Republican. I'm sorry, you just need to do that. But now, that's not a FAPA endorsement. It's a nonprofit research institution. It's just my personal view. But we've had an amazing journey watching developments in Taiwan. And some of you have had the entertaining job of watching me grow up a little bit over these years. I might have been 20 pounds ago, and I might have gone up 30 and down 10 and back up, and it's a little bit of a change. And every time I go to Taiwan, I gain 10. I need to wait 6 months before I can go back. But I am eternally grateful for the part of my life that Taiwan has become. We had a political campaign last year that talked about America first. That's not the topic of my speech, although I do feel that. I love my country. And I never loved my country more than when I'd lived overseas for a couple of years and come home to America. It wasn't because Taiwan was a bad place. I had a wonderful experience. But to me, there was, as the saying goes, no place like home. And to come back to the United States in 1989, at a time when the whole world seemed to be changing right before our eyes, all the assumptions that I grew up with in the Cold War seemed to be changing. Some of the assumptions people had had about China in the 1980s had changed tragically with the developments of the Tiananmen massacre that I witnessed from the very large city of Hengchun. And I will never, ever forget that small town completely shutting down, and the evening variety program with Peng Cha-Cha and a few other people, no jokes. They delivered the news. They talked through how people were processing what they had witnessed. For me, it was a threshold experience because at a young age, I was studying Chinese language. I had been told that I was going to the real China, and I would have the opportunity to learn traditional characters and traditional Chinese and have this wonderful experience in the real China on Taiwan, and then come back and continue my studies and my career. But I could not forget what I had seen about China during that time, but more importantly, what I had seen in Taiwan. The people of Taiwan were exceedingly gracious to me as I traveled around the countryside. I never went to Taipei during my time as a missionary, except at the moment right before I got on a plane and came home to the United States. The entire 2 years were in southern Taiwan. And it was, as all of you know, and as was remarked upon at lunch, it was a time of transition for Taiwan. I thoroughly enjoyed going to night markets and watching puppet shows that I couldn't understand and eating foods that I wasn't sure what they were. And there were a lot of times when you could go to a wonderful small Taiwanese town and there would be some kind of community activity that you could participate in. I recall in 1988 in Kaohsiung, there was one of these events going on and it was really loud. But there were a bunch of vendors cooking up food because you could smell the smoky flavor of roasted chicken and other kinds of stuff coming over, so I was attracted. And we went to the crowd, and all these people were wearing green. I had no idea what the meaning of that was. And it was at a time when all of you know the Dong Wai was transitioning into becoming a legal political party, and there began to be a few more rallies that were gaining in size. And so I got a firsthand taste of this real China experience where people adamantly told me, we're not China, we're Taiwan. I said, well, but this Julio Zheng says China right on it. And everywhere I go, there's a policeman that has China on his uniform that I have to give pictures to, and he laughs at me every time I move. And it was part of my intellectual journey to understand the people that I was interacting with. I spent a chunk of my time in 1988 also in Tainan County, I guess back when before it was a metropolitan area of Tainan. And I lived in the city of Xinying. There was an 80-year-old man in the afternoon that would teach me how to play ping pong. And he very convincingly demonstrated the commingling of gong fu and ping pong. And he sort of danced back and forth, making me run all over the place. I never fully understood you could run that much playing ping pong. He thought it was very funny. It was good exercise. He was a wonderful man. But outside of Xinying was a town that a man who became a very important friend of mine lived. It was the town of Madou. His name was William Chen. And he was a very gregarious personality, when I met him, he spoke fluent English. And so it was easy for me to get to know. I could speak Mandarin at the time, allegedly could speak very well, but there was still a lot I couldn't understand. But he absolutely refused to speak Mandarin. And he said, you can speak to me in Japanese. And I said, well, it doesn't do me any good. He says, you can, and I'll speak to you in English, but I will never, ever speak to you in Mandarin. And I thought, what's going on here? This is the real China. How do you not speak the real Chinese? And he explained that his family's land had been taken by the government, and he hated the government. I thought, should you be telling me this? Because there were still people everywhere that would listen in on conversations. There were still people that could get into real trouble at that time. And as some of you attested, at lunchtime, you could get onto this famous blacklist. Something that ended up happening to me with a different country later in my career. But from William, I started to get a very different lesson of what this place called Taiwan was all about. And my search for the real China was going to take a bit longer because I was not finding it on this island. William was somewhat outspoken, not like everyone, but he did share with me events that were very true. And he introduced me to many other people in Mado who had some similar experiences. And it, for me, just as was described at lunchtime for the Solars family, when you see an injustice and you're able to close your eyes and walk away, to me, I think that just affects your soul. And I could never forget the pain and anger that some of these people felt, but it wasn't an anger like you wanted to go to war. It was an anger like, why was this taken from me? And we need to get our country back. We need to get our freedom back. And that's something that I grew up identifying with here in the United States. And so when I came back from my time as a missionary, I went to university courses, and this is an enduring challenge that FAPA and Americans who are just activists in their politics that we need to tackle. The universities are filled with people who continue this fable of the real China. They're filled with people who, when they were trying to teach me about U.S. policy towards China and U.S. policy towards Taiwan, they're trying to force me to accept something I knew not to be true. And that's that there's something called one China. And when Kun met me in 1996, I was still not free from this myth. I was still very close to those university studies, and I had a lot of respect for these practitioners of policy in the past, and I was trying to learn my own way. And when people would talk about one China, it's okay, I guess these communiques say one China, but when I read them, I kept wondering, where does this say that this is American policy? Because to me, the number of Chinas was never as important as the nature of China. And it was very frustrating to me that Americans would talk about something that makes no sense in English. If you go talk to Americans on the street, you know that old thing that Jay Leno used to do, to just walk down the streets and do jaywalking. And you put a microphone in front of them, and you ask them, how many Chinas are there? Is this a trick question? Well, yes, it is, because it makes no sense. No one believes there's more than one China. But who cares how many of them there are? It matters if they're aiming missiles at you. It matters if they're brutalizing their own people. It matters if they're enabling a crazy dictatorship pursuing nuclear weapons. It's the nature of China that matters, and that's what our policy should be describing. And then when you look at the policy towards Taiwan, oh no, it's Taipei. What? I lived there for 2 years and only stepped into Taipei once. There's a lot of Taiwan that's not Taipei, as everyone knows. Once again, when I went, I had to get a visa from an organization that I wasn't even sure was giving me a real visa. I thought they could be taking my money and putting some strange stamp in my passport because it was the Coordinating Council for North American Affairs. Where's that? You get a visa to go to that, it sounds like you're going to North America. I'm trying to go to Taiwan. And they assure, no, this is the right visa. I don't know. So then later we change it to the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office. I guess that's kind of better than thinking it's North America. But how does an Economic and Cultural Representative Office facilitate discussions about security? Security wasn't in that. And as President-elect Trump famously tweeted last fall, how is it that I can't talk on the phone with a leader whose country buys billions of dollars of defense articles from our country? Well, it's because we've continued this fable. And sometimes fables help. Sometimes fables can educate. But sometimes fables are a lie. And I have been working for years and years, unsuccessfully, alongside many of you, unsuccessfully, to get more and more Americans to stop speaking in fable and to basically just tell the truth, that there's a beautiful place called Taiwan, a people who survived, outlived one of the stronger dictatorial regimes, outlived colonialism, struggled for their own freedom, and deserve to have recognition from the world for the accomplishments that they have reached. Most Americans instinctively will identify with this struggle and this journey. In fact, I don't know if any of you watched the President's remarks before the United Nations General Assembly. The only disappointment I had was he gave so much straight talk about everything. I would have loved it if he would have added one line about if this body believes in the principles upon which it was founded, where is the delegation from Taiwan? And as much as I know many people want Taiwan to be the United Nations, I think some of you know I don't really care about that because I think the United Nations is a useless institution. It has failed all of its fundamental missions. It has outrageous human rights violators on a human rights commission. It was one of its founding challenges was addressing security on the Korean Peninsula. What's the issue we're struggling with today, decades and decades later? But I will always support the right of people to seek membership. I frankly wish the whole institution would move to another country and people could have their field trip somewhere else. But I'm an extremist that way. I strongly, strongly support overcoming the injustice, ridiculous injustice, that even reporters from Taiwan who don't even represent a government can't get credentials to cover a bunch of, I can't even think of a good word, a bunch of bureaucrats in an international body. And to me, I just can't fathom how people have followed this fable to such an extreme that it is offensive and seemed to be in violation of international law, which of course it isn't, for these even reporters to seek credentials. I admire the people that have beat their head against this wall for a very long time and have made some progress. I know that there are some Taiwan NGOs that are able to participate, and that's good. And the people of Taiwan have had a bigger heart than I have on this because the people of Taiwan still give very, very generously to a lot of social and economic causes that institution says it believes in. And many of its members don't support those things. And here is the only democracy on the planet left outside, and it's still willing to give, still willing to serve. To me, that's a testament to the big heart of the people of Taiwan. That's to be congratulated. I have, I'm told, about 4 hours to speak, so I hope you're comfortable. There are many things that I've shared with many of you before. So sometimes I struggle to try to share something new or different with you. But really, the simple truths that we visit every time we meet matter. To me, getting together and talking about these things isn't the same as church, but it's a little bit like church, where you have to come together, organize around the things that you deeply believe in, fellowship with people that you love and care for, resolve to take action together as you leave and go out into the world. So what are some things that we should be resolved to do together as you, after doing many, many good things this weekend, go back out across the United States? I am a very, very firm believer in being more active in the States. But I will tell you that what you're gathered here to recognize this weekend is the establishment of a very humble organization that has punched very high above its weight for 35 years. It deserves applause. In my time in working in this town, there are a lot of organizations that come and go before reaching 35. There are some organizations that come and go before they reach 5. And I know that many people have worked for and with FAPA, and they didn't do it to get rich, because last I checked, it doesn't have an exorbitant budget. And the people who have stuck with this have done it because of commitment to a cause. And I personally am very, very grateful to know all of the people that work in the Washington office, those who prior and those currently, and I think that they deserve a great deal of our gratitude and thanks also. One thing that you can all resolve to do going forth from this meeting is to figure out what portion of your income you can commit to give on a monthly or annual basis to something that matters a great deal to you. I've spent a lot of my time in political parties where we're trying to raise budgets and funds for campaigns, and we usually are living from generous donor to generous donor, trying to sew it all together and hold it all together. And we've always talked about having a monthly donor program. And FAPA may already have this. We tried to build it for the state party in Idaho when I was the chairman there, and we got several people to sign up. But if everyone who is committed to this cause would even just commit to having their credit card charged $5 or $10 a month, think of how much more resources there might be to cover events and meals and transportation and other kinds of things to operate the little engine that could in the FAPA DC office. Think if people were willing and able to give $100 a month in doing that, how much more across the broader membership you can do. Instead of having to wait to be asked to cut a big check, if you make a living commitment to do this on a regular basis, it allows for predictability in operations. I was not asked to make this pitch, I promise you. But I have learned from experience in other organizations that this is actually vital. And so that's one thing that you might consider as an action that you can resolve to take leaving the meeting. An action that I hope you will resolve to take when you go back out to the various states is to think long and hard about how you can expand your circle of influence beyond those most familiar to you. There are a lot of Americans who have no idea how important Taiwan is in their lives. I have been advocating this in my state of Idaho for some time. I think this evening you might get to see a video that I've done for part of my campaign in Idaho. But it's a public education effort of sorts to make clear to the people in my state that they don't even have any idea when they look at the farms that you're driving by on the highway, who buys those goods. And they may know about China, they may know about some other customers, but for Idaho, Taiwan is one of our most important customers. And it's really, really important that the people of Idaho understand what Taiwan is, who their customer is, and that they should have skin in the game in making sure that American policy respects their big customer. The fact of the matter is that Idaho is one of the few states where Taiwan buys more from us than China does. So the 23 million people in Taiwan are buying more than 1.2 or 3 billion people in China from us. Per capita, that makes Taiwan Idaho's most voracious customer. We should wake up every day wearing I Love Taiwan buttons because it keeps our farms going and money into our schools and things like that. But Idaho is not alone in this. Not every state has our trade statistics, but I need you to join me in helping make more mainstream the understanding of the value Taiwan presents, not just to the United States, but to the United States. Understand, if you look at the way the United States Senate is working or not working at the moment, it's a function of states. The United States Senate was established under our Constitution to represent the interest of states, and the House was the people's house. It was meant to be organized around the popular vote. We had an amendment that made it so that you have direct vote for senators, but still, 2 by 2, just like Noah's Ark, the states climb into the United States Senate, and a low population state like Idaho has equal power as a high population state like California or New York or Florida or Texas, that other big state. Well, that is a tremendous opportunity, because I would wager to say that a lot of those low population states have agricultural products that Taiwan buys, has other kinds of manufacturing and research that Taiwan is relevant to, and has a population that is more down-to-earth, middle America, God-fearing, church-going people that are going to end up with a higher probability of common values with the Taiwan experience than they are with the realities of China. And so we have work to do to help mainstream America understand that Taiwan should be a mainstream idea. It does need to be more than a partisan issue, although I am kind of happy that Republicans tend to be good on this. There have been some Republicans that have done some really bad things on this. We need to be honest and to push that dialogue. The strongest power of influence in American politics is going to come from the voters in the states. The reason why a fable was able to be imposed upon the United States as a policy was because of the disconnect between grassroots voters and policymaking in the White House and the State Department. The Congress has been that connective tissue many, many times, and that kind of connection must remain. That is why it is absolutely vital that you have a presence here that continues to knock doors, continues to make personal relationships. What we all listened to at lunch today was a function of a good man and an even better wife, but it was also a function of personal relationships with people who have a vote, who have a voice, and are willing to use it. That must be sustained. And so active engagement with Congress has to continue, but do not forget about going back into the states and working the legislatures as hard as people here are working the Congress. Work your governors. In a state like mine, there isn't even security at the State House, because a state like mine, everyone has a gun. But no metal detectors, because they'd always go off. And so you can walk right into the state capitol building on one side of it and turn right into the governor's office. And sometimes you'll even run right into the governor. I don't think you can do that in New York or California, probably not in Texas. But in a lot of other states you can. Are you? Really? Are you? It's important to go back out and build those relationships. Number one, that might be a future president or cabinet official. Might be a future congressman or senator. Or it might be a governor that is ready, willing, and able to lead a delegation to Taiwan to promote state goods and programs of cooperation between the state and entities in Taiwan. We have a lot that we can do to build that foundation up. Most people know the analogy from the Bible about a house built on sand. Really, U.S.-China policy has been on sand for better part of a half century. And it's still standing, but it's really built on sand. U.S.-Taiwan relations have some strong points, but it's still very, very vulnerable. How many of you are concerned that Taiwan can be used as a bargaining chip in negotiations with China about North Korea or anything else? Well, the fact that you could have that anxiety is a testament to the tenuousness that you feel U.S.-Taiwan relations has. My most disappointing day in the White House was listening to one of my colleagues go in and give a briefing to the president, and then the president goes out in front of a camera standing next to the premier of China and rebukes the leader of Taiwan as this premier of China just grins and doesn't say anything. That was terrible. That was anecdotal evidence of how tenuous policy towards Taiwan can be. The anchor that will keep it from ever being able to swing that way has to be persistent continuation of the engagement with China, but strong investment building up similar foundations in the states, in the legislatures, and with those leaders. So those of you who, against better judgment, belong to the other party, go engage the people in that other party in your state. Get them committed to stand for what's right in the world. Get them to stand for an inspiring and attractive story about Taiwan's journey from being a colony to being under martial law and a dictatorship to coming out from under that shadow, struggling to come into its own, and that Taiwan is Taiwan. It's not China. And most Americans will get it. But we have to make it personal for them. I've loved the opportunity to go around the United States and have been exceedingly well received by many of you at different Taiwanese American gatherings. What can we do together to make it so that we have a similar sized gathering in your communities that's not Taiwanese and still be able to talk about the importance of these issues? I'm willing to work with you. I don't have the answer about how to do this, but it's another layer of how we can solidify identification with why being pro-Taiwan is good American policy. It's not just because you've got good food and you have lovely people. It's because it's good American policy that will make it more sustainable. So I think we have some opportunities to take a few actions. I hope it's not inappropriate for me to challenge you to step beyond these boundaries, but I am ready, willing, and able to walk that journey with you as you try to do that, and to try to recruit as many of my friends to come along. There are people in political parties that should be interested in engaging, and they should be cooperative partners in doing these kinds of things. We have to take back free speech and intellectual integrity in our universities also. You, more than any other group of people, should be sensitive to the pernicious impact that the high dollars from exchange students from one country that begins with P, ends with C, and has an R in the middle has over the governance of universities when they become so reliant on a huge chunk of their budget coming from government-funded students from China. I welcome the idea of Chinese students coming and getting a slice of America. I shudder at the image of them getting a slice of America if the campus is not respectful of free speech. But I've seen campuses where people try to organize a Taiwan event and Chinese protesters organize and the event gets shut down. We have to make a big deal about those kinds of things. So in political parties, in universities, we have to take back freedom of association and free speech and some sense of activism. By courtesy of FAPA, I have come to be friends with a shouting ponytail guy from Taiwan, and I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. But look, we need to have young, you got it. We've got to get young, interesting people from Taiwan coming to the United States, engaging young, interested people in U.S. universities and around our country. So I think that those are a few practical things that we can do together. As I said, I actually subscribe a little bit to the President's America First notion, but for me, in my heart, Taiwan will always be second. I always feel as though I've been treated as somewhat of an honorary citizen when I visited Taiwan. I've been blessed to have the opportunity to meet with every one of the elected presidents of Taiwan. Some of them were willing to listen more than others. But as we were coming in, I just share one last anecdote or experience that is a treasure for me. After I left the White House, I had the opportunity to go back to Taiwan a series of times. And for the first time in my career, I had an opportunity to sit down with former President Lee. President Lee, to me, was an amazing example as a leader. I lived in Zhanghua the day that Jiang Jingguo died. And I was told that this person, Li Denghui, was going to be a temporary leader of Taiwan. And that temporary leader reigned for 12 years. And he did some amazing things. I was working in the Defense Department when he visited Cornell, and he repeated those dastardly words, Republic of China on Taiwan, so many times that it earned missile tests, and we had a Straits crisis. And it was after that that I left the Defense Department and I went to the Heritage Foundation. And so to be able to sit down with him, he was extremely generous with his time, really spoke for 4 hours. That's where I got the idea of speaking for 4 hours. But I loved listening to hear him talk very genuinely about his life, about growing up in the colonial time, speaking Japanese, describing how he came to feel a passion and a love for Taiwan, and what the driving principles and goals were for his time as president of the Republic of China on Taiwan, as they said. And he spoke very tenderly about how he didn't know when the time would come, but every day he would pray at the beginning of the day to be able to do something for the country that he loved and the people that he loved. And he'd prayed that when he put his head down on his pillow, he might wake up another day. But he said, I don't know which day I'm going to put my head down on my pillow and I won't wake up. And it was just very tender to me to see the human side of what I consider to be one of the greatest, most transformational leaders in Asia. And he happened to be in Taiwan, a place that I'd been blessed to come to know. And it was kind of in the context of that conversation that he was joking around about my name. And somehow it's taken life in the media. And so it just to end on the same note of fable. You can go ahead and perpetuate the fable, but he joked about that he was Taiwan de Ahui and I was 美国的 Ahui, and I thought it was the greatest honor he could give me. So, 美国的 Ahui, 感谢你. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. And interesting that you say that we don't do this to get rich, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that. And I think that's always one of the 3 reasons we give why FAPA is successful. As Steve said, we don't do this to get rich. So this is an unselfish lobby. We do this not for ourselves, we do this for our Akong, Ama, and all our family in Taiwan. Yeah. And the second reason why I think FAPA is so successful and has been able to sustain over the past 35 years is that we have a really American product, I say. You know, we promote freedom, human rights, democracy, self-determination. These are American values. I've never met a member of Congress who says, no, I don't support self-determination, freedom, democracy, human rights. So we put the product of independence, Taiwan independence, and we wrap it up in a piece of shining wrapping paper called self-determination, freedom, democracy, human rights. Third reason is that we are a grassroots organization. I've been in Washington 25 years, 27 years, and I think that grassroots members, that is what members of Congress listen to.
Yep.
You can be a Bob Dole, or you can be a Dick Gephardt, and you go to your friends and say, hey, for old time's sake, let's just help me one more time. But you can only do that much.
Right.
And I've sat in meetings where there were professional lobbyists and FAPA lobbyists and say, yeah, we listen to these FAPA guys because they really care. They don't do that because they can bill a client.
Right.
So these are the 3 reasons I wanted to share with you. All right? Good ones, right?
Outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Last, I'm going to do some Q&A. You want to add something? Oh. Yeah, I want to do some Q&A we still have about 10, 12 minutes. I want to ask the first question. That's
Okay.
what the moderator has the right to do. Steve, at FAPA, we primarily Congress. We think Congress kind of holds the key to Taiwan's future. We go to think tanks, we go to, we talk with other groups, we try to broaden our views, our circle of influence, maybe. And you told me several years ago that when you worked in the White House, and you worked in the Heritage Foundation, which is a famous think tank, a big think tank. Can you share with us the view about the influence of think tanks, especially on the White House?
Yeah. Well, I did work for 5 years in the White House and would have occasion to see what was in the president or the vice president's briefing books for the day. And a lot of times you would have background memos that would be attached to meeting memos. So a meeting memo would say, you're meeting with this person for this purpose, and here are your talking points, and here's some policy things. But then you would have some background reading in case the principal in government wanted to get deeper on an issue. And in my 5 years, I never once saw a think tank paper attached to one of those meeting memos. And so if you think about what a senior political leader deals with, they might like the idea of reading a book, but they don't really have a lot of time to read very many books. They might like the idea of reading a 20-page memo, but they don't really spend that much time reading 20-page memos. Some of their staff may read them and draw some points from them, but the product that's done in those settings doesn't really have resonance or relevance to the kinds of meetings that our top leaders have. And so the legend of think tanks in Washington usually is built around influence with Congress more than the executive branch. But in my experience, we've seen a change. When I was hired by the Heritage Foundation, I was young. I was naive. I was willing to work for very low wages. In fact, the promise that was given to me when I was hired at Heritage is they won't pay very well, but they'll make you famous. And they honored that commitment and did not pay me very well. But it did lead to very important opportunity going forward. But that was a time when there was an incentive to have forward-leaning, somewhat provocative views put out in public to try to drive debate. And I think you've seen over recent years much more caution and nuance come into the kinds of writings that are coming out of these institutions. And there are occasional bright spots. I don't want to be overly negative. I've been warned that I can be too negative sometimes, so I'm trying to reform myself. But for the most part, too often you end up with the same people giving the same message to the same audience with the same results over and over and over. And in some cases, I can go to an event in Washington and hear the same people give the same message I heard them give in 1996. That is a problem. And so we have to have, it's one of the reasons why you have to give activist groups more of the resources to push current issues, because you can't make progress playing around with nuance and just repeating the same leftovers over and over and over. You have to have something that's relevant, you have to have a relationship that will receive it, and you have to have the credibility that it's been useful. And I think that's what Kuhn was talking about, what people will turn and say, I'm listening to those guys because I know them and they're not in it for the money, but also because what they said has proven to be accurate and useful. And that, to me, is where the rubber meets the road in trying to influence policy.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do on Monday, where we all fan out over Capitol
Yeah.
Hill to push for a Taiwan Travel Act and these sort of things.
Excellent.
All right, who has a question for Steve? Yes, Xinjing, and then Thomas.
Okay, Steve, what's your suggestions or strategy in your mind to help Taiwan to become an independent country or even to join UN?
Yeah.
Even Taiwan keeps threatening from China. What's your suggestion and best strategy you have in your mind?
Well, this is a deceptively brief question that could have a very long answer. But I know it was meant in goodwill. Honestly, I respect the desire that people have to enter the United Nations. I am not going to play a part in any strategy to enter the United Nations. I respect that others want to put that effort in. It's a corrupt organization where the votes are bought. It's a very, very difficult circumstance. It's an injustice, and I would protest the injustice. But I think you get more mileage by highlighting the injustice and forming substantive ties with people who agree with you than worrying about membership at this point. And I forget what the other part of the question was.
You said about independence.
Oh,
How do we
independence.
reach independence?
Well, I mean, I subscribe to the view that Taiwan already is independent. And so this is almost like a theory of education of, do you believe the knowledge is inside someone and you're just teaching them how to discover it? Or are you taking something that's outside of their existence and giving them something new to digest or integrate into their being? To me, independence is already into the being of the Taiwanese people. And I think the younger generation of Taiwanese people, I believe in this notion of natural independence. And I think that you just need to treat that like a garden. Pull the weeds, give it fertilizer, give it a little bit of water, nurture it, allow it to grow. And over time, that foundation will be very, very strong and undeniable. And that's, I think, the best we can do for the time being. I think empirically, Taiwan is Taiwan. It already is independent. Do you want to have the fight about declaring it? I respect the right for people to have that fight. But to me, Taiwan's independence is declared every time they cast a vote for a president. But that's just me.
All right, Thomas.
Steve? Steve, my question is, have Chinese agents ever come to lure you? And how? Please.
Well, I haven't really been wooed that much. I think that they have a degree of rationality in recognizing whether someone is redeemable or irredeemable from their point of view. In the 1990s, when I worked at Heritage, there were a number of Chinese experts and government officials and others that would invite me to conferences, visits to China. I was, at a very young age, involved in the dialogue that Wang Daohan was having with Gu Zhenfu at the time, and I would sometimes travel to Shanghai, and I would meet with Wang Lao, and he would give me a piece of paper, and I would take it to Taipei, and it would be a part of the conversation. And in 1998, I received an extraordinary message. I was on my way, by way of Hong Kong to Shanghai. I was supposed to meet with Xiong Guangkai and possibly Jiang Zemin at the arrangement of Wang Daohan. I don't know whether that was ever going to happen, but in latter part of 1998, I wrote a couple of papers talking about what has been called Liang Guo Lun. And I am actually a believer in special state-to-state relations. And I believe in special state-to-state relations between Taiwan and the United States. I believe in special state-to-state relations between Taiwan and China. And when President Lee articulated his policy, I wrote papers explaining it and trying to explain to Congress and others who would listen that this was rational and useful. As I arrived in Hong Kong, I received an urgent message from one of Wang Daohan's assistants saying, "You are welcome to come to Shanghai. However, we will no longer be your host and your visa will not be active. You may not be able to leave the airport." Oh, I forgot the most important first line in that email was, "Congratulations on becoming a father." My daughter had just been born not that long before that. So you can get a feel for the humanity of, congratulations on becoming a father, and you are hereby blacklisted and shall never again be able to come back into the People's Republic of China. And they held that blacklisting of me, and any DC think tank that was willing to have me on their delegation was blocked until they removed me from their delegation. And offensively to me, some of the famous Asia-oriented think tanks and some people that I used to respect on their boards gave in to that blackmail and would remove me from the delegation so they could go have their trip and their cross-strait dialogue. So I was blacklisted from that time until I went into the White House and when senior Chinese leaders wanted to meet with Vice President Cheney. And he was kind enough to at least allow me to work on a negotiation with them to say, if you want this meeting, you're going to need to apologize and promise not to blacklist people like Yates. And we got that done. I have since then chosen very, very rarely to go to China, because every time that I go, my phone is broken and my computer is broken. But on the upside, I never have a traffic problem because they always motorcade me everywhere I go because they don't want ordinary people interacting with someone as terrible as me.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Last question there in the back. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Yates. I have a question about the U.S. commitment to Taiwan. How America can reassure its commitment to Taiwan? I still remember that I once asked my classmates about, well, will United States will always support and defend Taiwan's safety, autonomy, independence, and so on and so forth. And she said that there's no question. I mean, is that a culture thing that you don't believe in America? We will help you in any way, but that's a problem because a lot of Taiwanese, they don't believe that for whatever reason. Because as you may know, you are also one of the victims. I mean, some media in Taiwan or elsewhere in the world will have this, will try to spread this image that, well, United States someday or somehow or under certain circumstances will not always keep its promise or commitment to Taiwan. And we all know that every country will need its friend. And just like in early history of the United States, there was France, there was Spain, that was very supportive of America, and they once said that, wow, that America is already America, so you can keep being a colony and you are America. So, but they just say you want independence, you can be United States of America. There's no such a problem. And then you will not doubt that kind of commitment. So my question is, so it was just like, back to my question, so in that circumstances, and I believe that you have encountered a lot of this situation before, so how do American politicians like you are try to enhance this kind of image, very clear, strong, doubtlessly to Taiwanese people that, well, we are friends.
Right.
United States will support you, right? So that's my question.
Thank you. Well, the people of Taiwan are not wrong to have this anxiety. I mean, after all, Taiwan has been sold out. And so this is something that you know can happen because it has happened. And so really, I can't fault anyone for feeling that kind of anxiety. However, I firmly have faith in the American people that if the question is put to them, a huge majority of the American people naturally will identify with Taiwan's journey, naturally would support its desire for security, self-determination, international space, recognition, whatever it might be. I have less faith in the Congress than I have in the average American people, but I still have faith in the Congress to stand up and do that, partly because it has. And so because it has, I should have faith that at least we could count on this from time to time. The institution that I have the least faith in is the executive branch of the United States of America. It changes often. It gets overrun by bureaucrats who are part of this China fable. And I worry about those kinds of decisions being made in isolation there. The single best thing that I can do, that you can do, that we can do together is to firm up those two foundations I talked about. The American people at the grassroots level and in the Congress, those are our insurance policies against an unreliable and wavering executive branch. That's what we have to do. I think that I have been blessed that apparently there are people who care what I say, and I have been cursed that by doing so, sometimes they like to take what I say and twist it into a tool in their own battle with other people. But I think all of you here know what I've explained in my heart and what I've shared in my journey and the humble recommendations I make that we take together. And so I'll rely on you to help relay that. And when people want to raise questions, criticisms, or what have you, you've heard direct from me what my hope and my faith is in the future. And it's with you, it's with this great organization, and hopefully together we can continue to make progress. Thank you.
Sorry, Leo, because this was sort of the end thing. So we were done, unfortunately. I gave Leo almost a question, but this sounded like an ending. So let's keep it this way. So thank you very much, Steve.